thank you for this opportunity, everyone, and good evening to everyone who's tuned in to this webinar, and good afternoon from me in New York City, where I'm currently located and based. And I'm very excited to be here today to discuss my experiences with or as a specialist investor in the very exciting and very dynamic space of healthcare. Today, I'll tell you a little bit about my firm, which is OrbiMed, based in New York. Then the closed-end trust that I manage, the Worldwide Healthcare Trust. Give you a little bit of flavor on how we conduct our investment process, and end on some of the investment themes that we are working on for the rest of 2024 and beyond. But first up, a little bit about OrbiMed, if I may. As we continue to be, and I'm very proud to say this, the largest dedicated healthcare investment firm in the world. We just recently celebrated our 25th anniversary, and we're very proud of our long-term track record of success in investing in healthcare. We manage over 17 billion US dollars across all of our funds. We have almost 150 employees globally, which includes almost 40 MDs and PhDs, sort of like myself. And importantly, we invest across all components of healthcare, all stages of development, all subsectors, all geographies, all cap structures, and we're global in nature. As a firm, our investment efforts are spread across three different strategies. Public equities, where I'm primarily involved here in blue in this particular slide, but also private equities, both domestic in the US, but also a large Asia-based VC fund, as well as we do royalty and fixed income strategies. But you can see here where the trust fits in on all of that, with the Worldwide Healthcare Trust as our flagship public fund, as well as the Biotech Growth Trust, which I won't discuss today, but we also manage. And then OrbiMed also has some long short strategies for domestic investors here in the US. So what is the Worldwide Healthcare Trust? Well, we like to think of it really as a one-stop shop, if you will, for everything healthcare. And you can see this is our portfolio composition at the end of last quarter. And what does it show? This is a very typical allocation for us, but we invest in pharmaceuticals, and not just global large caps, but specialty pharmaceuticals, niche players. This includes generic drug makers as well. Biotechnology is a long-term important overweight for us in the Worldwide Healthcare Trust, and it's across all cap structures, from the large global biotechnology companies to the small emerging biotechs, one product, unprofitable companies. We also invest in medical technology, globally, healthcare services, particularly here in the US, life science tools. We also invest in Japan, especially Japan pharmaceuticals. We have a long history there. More recently, over the past 10 years, we've been involved in emerging markets. And we also dabble in some private or unquoted investments as well in the trust. But really, our number one focus is on innovation across all of these sectors. And that theme of innovation will be a recurring talking point for me during this presentation. And the overall profile of the trust is certainly one of growth. The trust is co-managed by myself and the managing partner of OrbiMed, Sven Borho. In addition to managing the trust, I'm also an analyst, so I sort of wear two hats at OrbiMed. Because in addition to the Worldwide Healthcare Trust, I'm also responsible for all our global investments across pharmaceuticals, again, across all funds that we manage. So what is it that we do on a daily basis? And I think this is an interesting slide, because I think one of the unique things about being a specialist investor in healthcare is how adept you need to be in understanding science and technology to really be able to properly speculate about the rapidly evolving fields of medicine and its highly idiosyncratic nature. And I think Tom talked about that is knowing your fund managers and having some trust and knowing their topic. And it's interesting, if you were to be a fly on the wall of one of our daily portfolio meetings, it would sound, I think, a little less like a group of investors talking about stocks and more like a scientific lab or a doctor's office discussing disease states, new therapies, just released clinical data, and what it all means to the equities involved in some of these fascinating developments in the space. In other words, and as this slide attests to, we do exhaustive due diligence across the healthcare space, and we are a classic, typical bottom-up investor, and that's one of our core pillars of our investment style of the Worldwide Healthcare Trust is bottom-up investing. And we do this across multiple things. I have some examples on this particular slide, but clinical trial events, clinical trials of all stages, from preclinical animal testing to first in human to safety to registrational or pivotal trials. We cover all of that, and it is an enormous undertaking across therapeutic categories in healthcare. And part of this is including attending medical meetings, consuming medical literature, almost unexhaustively, but also handicapping regulatory events and trying to understand new drug approvals across the globe, not only US, Europe, Japan, China, but that's a pivotal step in unlocking value in some of these companies as getting a new drug approved. And underscoring that is being able to understand the global intellectual property and the landscape and other legal situations like product liability and how that can affect different companies in this particular universe. Another big part is engaging with key opinion leaders, industry experts, disease experts to truly understand the medical landscape and collaborating with experts across many fields. We also spend an immense amount of time with prescription pharmaceutical data, new product modeling, understanding new product launches, and the commercial impact that they're having through the industry and through the companies in the portfolio. And of course, we do plenty of company modeling as well. An interesting point here too is a very important mantra at OrbiMed for us is investing along good management teams. So we're constantly meeting with companies, meeting with management on a global basis. And yes, we are in a presidential election year here in the US. And so politics and policy is going to be an important backdrop and maybe a little bit more front and center in the second half of this year as we approach November and that very important election here in the US. But let me pivot really to what drives healthcare stocks, especially over the last 15 years or so, which is a real material inflection of innovation. And there's that word I'll keep using again. But the innovation across the entirety of the healthcare space has really accelerated over the last 15 years, which is probably no surprise as the technological element has also accelerated during that period. And as I thought about the last decade or so and our performance, I looked up what were the biggest winners each year over the last 10 years in the Worldwide Healthcare Trust. And it kind of surprised me a little bit on how diverse the big winners were on an annual basis. And so I made this slide rather inadvertently, I suppose, but we have found innovation and growth from all over the healthcare spectrum. And just to step through some of it here, large cap biotech stocks are a part of that, from Gilead and the cure of hepatitis C, life science tools with Illumina and the genomic revolution and bringing down the cost of being able to map the genome of humans. Japan Pharmaceuticals with Ono Pharmaceuticals has also been a major winner for us, as they are at the forefront in the revolution of what we call immuno-oncology, which is an element of science where your own body is stimulated to thwart cancer. But also in here are mid-cap biotech, diagnostic companies, European biotech, Chinese healthcare companies, medical devices are represented here, diagnostics are represented here, vaccine companies, specialty pharmaceutical companies with Horizon and their launch of a drug which was record-breaking for a disease I didn't even know about 4 years ago, which was called thyroid eye disease. And they presided over $1 billion first-year launch. And more recently, of course, we have large cap pharmaceuticals represented, primarily due to the obesity craze that has gripped the stock market over the last couple of years. But ultimately, when I look at this slide, I think it's truly emblematic of the Worldwide Healthcare Trust and our collection of best ideas across the healthcare universe, unified by this continued theme of innovation, which is driving outsized gains in the portfolio. So let's get into some of these specifics that, or some of these investment themes that we're working on right now. And the number one topic by far really remains obesity. It's interesting, I don't think many people know, but this is really a 20-year-old class of drugs, and it's taken the market by storm over the last 2 years, but we're really just getting started. Obviously, the inflection comes from innovation because the compounds today have unparalleled efficacy and efficacy that we couldn't have necessarily foreseen even 10 years ago. But the launch of Zepbound from Eli Lilly has been record-setting into its 9th month now. The global rollouts so far have been small but very calculated, but we're astonished to see that patients in some European markets are actually clamoring to pay out of pocket for some of these medicines. The big question in 2024 remains supply. How much of these drugs can Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk actually make? Because they will sell it all this year. Both just last month, both companies raised their full year guidance on their obesity compounds for these drugs. The demand has just really been insatiable. Lifecycle management and competition are full steam ahead. And the leaders in next-gen injectables and oral alternatives actually remain Lilly and Novo, quite interestingly. Additional indications are obviously driving demand beyond obesity and opening doors to access, and we're seeing benefits in heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, osteoarthritis, heart failure, sleep apnea. We've seen positive data across multiple indications outside of diabetes and simply weight loss. Really, at this point, the long-term question for us is how much can they sell at the end of the decade? We started discussing this as a $100 billion market last year. Well, as we see the ramp continue this year and the supply getting better, I think now we're talking about a $200 billion market by the end of this decade is certainly possible. And the real game changer in this class of drugs has not just been the oppressive weight loss and the use of social media for patients to promote some of the profound impacts they've had on their weight loss, but the landmark data from something called the SELECT trial, which was a trial conducted by Novo that showed that these obesity drugs, in this case Wegovy from Novo Nordisk, could substantially lower your risk of having a heart attack, stroke, or dying from a cardiovascular event. This was a watershed moment for the industry, which really opened doors to access and reimbursement to millions of patients. Because now this is no longer a drug for weight loss. This is a cardiovascular drug that has weight loss as a side effect. And payers, and I think ultimately governments, are going to have to reimburse because the impact is just much too profound to ignore. And that's what is happening now, at least so far in the US. Back in March, the US Food and Drug Administration recognized this landmark achievement and granted full approval for SELECT trial, making Wegovy the first ever treatment to be approved for the risk of serious heart problems in patients who are overweight. And the US federal agency that provides health coverage to seniors in the US quickly followed up, agreed, and said that they would sponsor coverage to seniors in the US for obesity medications for the first time ever in its history. So I kind of regard this as proof of concept, if you will. These companies' ability to get these drugs reimbursed due to approvals outside of weight loss is going to be a game changer going forward. And you can see quickly just on this slide, the enormous prescription volumes for the big four, which is Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. We're almost at 1.5 million prescriptions per week in the US, and the sales ramp is approaching $1 billion per week. The launches have just been incredible. But quickly, on some other disease states, Alzheimer's disease, we used to consider the holy grail of pharmaceutical development, but this is another great example of unprecedented innovation in healthcare. It's been 30 years between new drug approvals for Alzheimer's patients, and Leqembi from Eisai and Biogen is the first ever disease-modifying agent to garner full approval. The ramp has been slow. This is a new class of drugs. Like I said, first time in 30 years we have a drug like this, but sales are starting to inflect now. Eli Lilly got into the Alzheimer's game. They just got their drug approved. It's just launching now. We think that'll buoy the market, inflect sales going forward. But there's new formulations coming out. Next gen products are already in phase 3. There's new targets being developed. The whole universe of Alzheimer's disease is just at the beginning, and I think there's a huge runway going forward for this treatment of this, quite frankly, horrific disease. Also oncology, this has been a very well documented hotbed of innovation over the past decade, especially with the success of the first generation of the immuno-oncology agents, which I also mentioned. But we're now on to next generation agents, and we're eagerly awaiting data there to see if this IO universe can expand and continue to grow beyond the $50 billion market that we expect it to be already. ADCs is a really interesting space. That's an antibody drug conjugate. These drugs are like heat-seeking missiles for cancer cells, which quietly, deliberately bring deadly payloads right to tumor cells to destroy cancers. This is probably the hottest topic in oncology right now. Probably close behind is something called a bispecific. This is a next generation antibody, which is just instead of targeting one drug, or excuse me, one disease or one target, but can target two at once. This is probably the next big thing in oncology, and there's a lot of excitement going on there right now. And ultimately, though, as many of these clinical catalysts play out across numerous or a dozen plus therapeutic categories, it sometimes can create a bit of a minefield of sorts that can make navigating the therapeutic spaces difficult because there's nothing guaranteed in drug development. Drugs fail all the time, and it can be downright scary at times. But one thing is clear, that these positive catalysts that can play out can re-rate valuations across companies and across the sector as they unfold. And these drugs are getting approved. We've had over 400 drugs approved now over the past 7 years, if you add 2024 to the list. So that's important. So this marks the most productive 8-year period in the industry's history. And I think that's important. New drugs are getting discovered, developed, and approved. It's critical for the industry. And with that, I will just leave you with this in summary. As we reflect on the coming 30th anniversary of the Worldwide Healthcare Trust, our strategies and principles have really largely remained the same, which is bottom-up investing, which I tried to articulate to you here, the clear focus on innovation and growth, using an allocation methodology to concentrate our best ideas in the portfolio across the entire specific healthcare arena.